Next, we have Cole Harrison virtually. Cole, are you out there? Sean Kennedy. In person? Okay.
He may be on virtual now.
Sean, you on
Good
virtually?
afternoon. I am on virtually, correct.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, for allowing me to speak today. I'm speaking in support of S2471, the act of prohibiting the Massachusetts National Guard from being deployed into active combat without a formal declaration of war by Congress. Speaking on behalf of the Unified Libertarians of Massachusetts, which is our state's national affiliate for the National Party. So to get this off, 2.5 centuries ago, right here in Massachusetts, our forefathers resisted a distant king's tyranny over their militias. Today, we face similar overreach with our executive branch. For decades, presidents have federalized National Guard units for overseas operations without formal declarations of war, relying instead on broad statutory authorities like the 2001 authorization for use of military force. It's not defense, it's not balance, it appears to be more abuse. The Constitution is clear. Article 1, Section 8 gives Congress, not the President, the power to declare war. The founders put the responsibility in the legislator because, as James Madison wrote in 1798, the Constitution supposes the executive branch of power is most interested in war and most prone to it. It has accordingly, with studied care, vested the question of war in the legislator. Yet for over 20 years of my lifetime, Congress has dodged that responsibility. Instead of formal declarations of war, we have authorized authorizations for use of military force. The 2001 AUMF passed after 9/11 has been stretched far beyond its intent, not only for Afghanistan, but to justify combat operations in countries never even mentioned in the law. The 2002 AUMF, used to launch the invasion in 2003, was finally repealed after 20 years of active war. But the 2001 AUMF lingers as a blank check for presidents of any party that has that power. What has this meant? In Afghanistan in 2001, Iraq 2003, Syria today, even on the Horn of Africa, these are not declared wars. No war has been formally declared since World War II, yet our Guard is repeatedly sent abroad under vague authorizations that evade accountability. And when Congress won't own the wars, the people cannot hold them accountable either. Meanwhile, Massachusetts needs its Guard here at home. When floods, storms, and blizzards hit our state, it is the Guard that rescues neighbors, clears the roads, and stabilizes our communities. Yet deployments abroad often overlap with crises at home, as we've seen in recent years with floods and storms. Our communities lose readiness when our Guardsmen are stretched too thin across the world. Some critics worry about the retaliation from Washington, but there are safeguards already in place. I see my time's ending, so I'll wrap this up. This bill aligns with the very spirit of the War Powers Resolution, which has been more recently used. That federal law was supposed to restore Congress's war-making ability, but what this bill's intention is to not allow our Guards troops to be used in wars that are not officially declared in accordance with our Constitution. So, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions? Excuse the customary thanks. Thank you.
Who's next? I lost him.
Brian, I'm going to butcher this one, but Brian Zarajic.
Brian Zakrajic, thank you.
How do I pronounce that,
Hello,
sir?
Zakrajic.
Thank you.
Or Z. They want a boot camp. They told me from now on I'll be known as Z.
Thank you for being here.
Hello. Thank you. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to be heard today on Senate Bill 2471. The primary reason I support this bill is incredibly personal to me. I joined the Navy in 1999, and in January of 2005, I was stationed on board the USS Ronald Reagan. During January, my best friend, Benjamin Farrell, was killed due to an accident aboard the carrier, leaving behind his parents who loved him, a brother who idolized him, and a fiance who was pregnant with his child. I was one of the 2 people that brought him home to his family in Minnesota. And I still remember being told upon arrival at the airport that I had to open the coffin before his parents got there to see if any embalming fluid had leaked. The effects that I suffered from this event were long-lived. For years, I regularly had nightmares, and I'm sure I suffered from at least some form of depression. I had difficulty finding a reason to get out of bed and start my day. At one point, I reached out to the command that I was at and expressed concern about my mental well-being. At that point in time, I was told not to go see a therapist by the highest ranking enlisted person at the command, as they might put me on antidepressants and I could lose my security clearance. Now, I followed that horrible advice, and I think I was lucky that I didn't try and hurt myself. Many others in similar circumstances were not so lucky. Now, I don't want to conflate what I went through with what service members that go overseas go through. Just as I can't imagine what Ben's family went through, I can't imagine how many others have gone through things worse than what I did. And the National Guard suffers particularly from this. Overall, U.S. population suicide rate in 2018 was 18 deaths per 100,000. Active duty military had 24.8 per 100,000, and the National Guard was at 30.6. We have people coming back after fighting in these undeclared conflicts. They're being forgotten and they're suffering for it. I can't think of a bill that would have as great an impact as Senate Bill 2471. From the lives that could be directly spared in conflicts deemed not important enough to declare war, to the suicides that could be prevented from happening since they wouldn't have witnessed the loss and devastation that occurs in these conflicts. Please think about those lives. Think about the heartache of the spouses, children, and parents that see their loved ones arrive home in a coffin. I've seen it firsthand, and it haunts me 20 years later. Please move Senate Bill 2471 forward.
Thank you, Brian, for your heartfelt testimony. Any questions?
Yes.
Senator Villas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And sir, first and foremost, thank you for your service. And I really appreciate your share today in terms of what you went through. It's something that obviously this committee takes very, very seriously. So again, I can't stress enough, thank you for your service. I'm trying to, and this is probably a question I could have asked the previous speaker and something that I'm, I guess, just curious about. In fact, what this process, I want to make sure I fully grasp what this involves. So a declaration of war by, a lack of a declaration of war by the Congress. Is this bill suggesting that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts take the legal authority to be able to say, essentially, no, we're not going to go? I'm just trying to fully grasp what this bill would actually do. And really what I'm getting at is kind of the constitutional implications of what this bill is getting at. I'm just questioning whether or not we even have the authority to do something like this.
Based upon the things that I've looked at, we do. I'm pulling up some additional information. I tried to make my testimony I'm going to get down to that 3-minute mark, and for that I apologize. So there is the ability to, grant this right to the state of Massachusetts so that if it hasn't been declared, we do not send our National Guard troops overseas. there's never, there's been threats in different states of, members of the National Guard come forward to testify at these hearings, and they pose concern about loss of military funding. It's never happened, with the need of a strong National Guard. I don't foresee the House or Senate saying we're going to deny this. I'm currently trying to find information about a court case, and I apologize.
No need to apologize.
I'm going to have to go back through and.
So, sir, by all means, feel free to submit to this committee in writing whatever answer you're able to find. I guess where I'm coming from on this, and this is what I'm trying to contemplate, is our constitutional framework, if you will, where, to your point, Article 1, the power to declare war with the Congress. Article 2 talks about the president being the commander-in-chief. And I'm just wondering, again, I'm trying to imagine a scenario where if the Guard is federalized, nationalized, whatever verbiage you want to use under Title 10, that the governor of Massachusetts, or the legislature for that matter, could say no. I guess the question would, has any other state done this, and has this been something that's been actually litigated in the courts?
So no other state has passed Defend the Guard. It's on in many states right now. They're trying to get it passed in many states. I know that there is a legal requirement, if necessary, to send them for training. And I will get the court case for you, and I'll submit that in written format. But there was, essentially it's been deemed for that training that can be sent, but not for the deployments. I will get that information to you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Excuse with customary thanks. Thank you, Brian. We have retired Brigadier General Tom Stewart virtually.
Thank you, and thanks for having me today. I'm retired Colonel Tom Stewart, Brigadier General of Massachusetts. Chairman Vilas, Chairman McGonigal, and distinguished members of the Joint Committee on Veterans and Federal Affairs. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. I served in Afghanistan. I retired after 32 years of service with the Massachusetts National Guard, and currently I'm serving the state in the role of Director of the State Retired List. And I'm here to express a strong opposition to House Bill 3829 and Senate Bill 2471, the legislation that seeks to prohibit the Mass National Guard from being deployed into active service without a formal declaration of war by Congress. The proposed legislation is part of a national movement that's being pushed by an outside group known as the 10th Amendment Center, and we need to protect against this within our own Commonwealth. While this initiative has been proposed in other states, it's crucial to understand its potential and significant tertiary consequences to our own Commonwealth before taking any steps toward its adoption here in Mass. The Mass National Guard plays a unique and essential role in both state and federal missions. In simple terms, we're equipped and resourced by the federal government. And if our ability to do our federal mission is blocked, the risk is to our infrastructure and the state capacity. Ultimately, these bills will degrade our state capacity for our state missions. We are a force structure designed to serve both the Commonwealth and the nation, and our federal mission is what enables us to receive that funding, the equipment, the personnel that we need to respond to overseas and domestic missions. And if we adopt this legislation, we're going to jeopardize our ability to fulfill that federal mission, which carries the state level implications. Should there be a perception that we're unwilling or unable to carry out our federal responsibilities, it's highly likely that our federal funding and force structure and equipment will be reassessed and removed altogether, and would leave us unprepared to support critical missions here in Massachusetts and across the country. And furthermore, if this is adopted, this legislation will have the significant impact on our own standing as the primary combat reserve for the Army and the Air Force. As written, the language in these bills could prevent overseas annual training and other training we need, military airlift, remotely piloted vehicle missions that are central to maintaining our combat readiness. And for example, under the proposed legislation, the governor would be prohibited from releasing the Mass National Guard on Title X active duty overseas combat missions. The last official declaration of war by the U.S. was in World War II. However, it's important that we understand that the nature of the global security environment has changed since then. Not all deployments are acts of all-out war, and we're needed. We need to stand up and we need to serve our federal responsibilities as well as our state responsibilities. I can see we're out of time. I just hope that we understand the tertiary implications of our own force structure, equipment, funding, and how it'll affect Massachusetts when we're needed in Massachusetts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General, for your testimony. Do you have any questions for the Representative Tasker? Gasky.
General, quick question for you. The bill specifically calls out militia and the other forces that we have, National Guard and whatnot. Can you explain the difference between the militia and the National Guard?
So the organized militia incorporates a variety of organizations, one of which is what you see as the Massachusetts Army and Air National Guard, and currently serving service members in both the Army and the Air National Guard branch of service. If you were to go down the structure of this, quote unquote militia, you'll find one of those organizations is the state retired list that I mentioned. And we're a group of retirees from the Air and the Army National Guard that we stay connected, and we stay connected in a variety of ways. For example, during the immigrant mission, where we were tasked with opening armories for their housing, we had retirees come in with their expertise to help support them, to support those missions. There was a bus driver shortage in Boston. We had a bunch of our retirees that are qualified to drive buses. They recertified from their old military Bluebird bus driving days, recertified to drive school buses, and they helped Boston through that problem. And then to go back to the COVID era, we brought back a whole bunch of our medical professionals that are retired National Guard members to help at the Holyoke Soldiers Home and elsewhere throughout our Commonwealth. So that's part of your militia right there. But what we're talking about today is the equipping, or we're talking about the usage of the National Guard and us getting in our own way of not allowing our National Guard to support any act or any deployment that's not a formal declaration of war. The big thing here is that I think it's getting missed is that global security environment has changed, and some folks aren't tracking on that. Not everything out there around the world is a declaration of war. And that's where we're missing the boat. I served in Afghanistan. I was a battalion commander of 684 soldiers, and every single one of them was proud of that service. We had over 1,000 that volunteered that wanted to go, so there's no hesitancy on our part. Like, we want to do these things. And I see us missing some of the tertiary effects if we end up supporting this bill. And that's what I'm here to warn you about today, to hopefully help you better understand it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Senator?
Yes. Sir, thank you. First, again, thank you for your service. Thank you for being here today. And I don't know if you were here for my previous question, but I think it's something that I want to inquire of all folks who come forward and testify on this today. First, I think you already indicated about no other states, but if I misinterpreted what you said, please correct me if wrong. If any other state has done this, and then really just the legal authority is kind of what I'm stuck on in this respect. Is there any legal authority to do this? And then lastly, I want to make a statement, and sir, you please correct me if I'm wrong. One of the challenges that I see upon first glance with this bill is that my understanding of the Guard/reserves out there today is that many Guard and Reserve units possess unique capabilities that in some instances the active component doesn't have. So if you were to take them, if you will, out of the fight, or essentially Massachusetts says, sorry, I think there's some really serious concerns that I'm really looking forward to hearing from folks about what that looks like and how they envision that. So that was 3 rapid questions, but interested in your response, sir.
3 great questions. The first one, do any other states do this? I can't comment on that. I really don't know. You asked about the legal piece. We are a dual missioned organization. We work for the President of the United States and the United States of America, and we work for the Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. If we are deployed on Title X in a federal status by the President of the United States, it's my understanding that the governors of the states cannot intercede on that. We go when the President wants us, period. The unique capabilities of the Guard don't exist within the active component. I've seen that firsthand, by the way, and it's incredible to watch when you go overseas and you're in a deployment zone wherever you end up. But we all have civilian occupations, and when we bring our civilian occupations overseas, you can look at trying to think of some examples. A construction worker that deploys with an infantry battalion, and we need construction done in a certain village or wherever we're deployed. That person carries very unique civilian skills that help us accomplish our mission, which part of that mission, by the way, is to find influence within the local population. And when we're able to support them in other ways, other than just their own security, it builds rapport that we need to accomplish our overall strategic objectives. So I think the unique capabilities of the Guard are that we are carrying our civilian skills with us wherever we go when we deploy.
But and I agree wholeheartedly, but in addition to that, my understanding is that there's also actual units that have in their job description certain things that the active component does not do as well. So where I'm getting at with this, sir, is that there could be a scenario where the military needs some type of a capability that a Guard unit in Massachusetts or elsewhere possesses, and if this legislation were to be signed into law, pushing aside the legality of it, we could essentially be hindering, I think, the ability to carry out whatever that mission is overseas because of that unique capability that's being told they can't go.
I think you're correct in saying that. I think that there are units within the Guard infrastructure that add to that unique capacity at a federal level that the active component may not have. I'm trying to think of some examples of that. I always go to my own, our own state, our own Commonwealth Cyber Battalion. When we look at what they bring, those members bring a unique capacity mainly because of some of their civilian roles. I don't think this is where you're going with it, but when we bring our cyber infrastructure somewhere overseas or elsewhere, we're bringing professionals that work within that industry locally, especially within our technology sector, that bring a capacity that active component cyber units do not bring. So I know where you're going with that, and I wish I could comment further on, force structure that we may have that active component doesn't. In many ways, I think you're correct. I just can't put my finger on exactly what those units are right now, and I apologize for that.
No need to apologize. Appreciate it. Thank you for the question, sir. I'm sorry for your answer. Sorry.
Any other further questions? Sir, excuse the customary thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next in person, we have Jason Brand. Good afternoon.
Hi, thank you, members of the committee. Can you hear me? I'm speaking on my own behalf in support of S2471 and H3829. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of the Constitution stipulates that only Congress has the authority to declare war. Yes, since 1942, and after decades of undeclared aggressive military interventions and invasions, including every war of this century and the global war on terrorism, the legislative branch has continually abdicated its responsibility for deciding to change the state of the nation from peace to war. Clause 15 delegates to Congress the power to call forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Yet Guard troops have had continuous and extended roles in overseas conflicts, particularly since 9/11, supporting more than 1.1 million deployments to the Middle East and elsewhere, upwards of 900,000 men and women, and more than the Marine Corps. Guard and Reserve units made up about 45% of the total force sent to Iraq and Afghanistan, and received about 18.4% of the casualties. As you all know, our Guard has been deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan with several units deploying twice or more. And they're also in permanent rotation to the Horn of Africa, and were just sent there in July. Our troops just returned from Poland. Notably, at their send-off in April, Major General Keefe told them their mission was to, quote, make sure Russia goes no further. We have not declared war on Russia. The reality is that all of these missions are absent any approval or consultation of state legislatures, and all contradict this constitutional intent of state control over their militias. As detailed in The War Horse in 2022 in their multi-part series, perpetual deployment of Guard members from Massachusetts have taken a heavy and tragic toll upon their return. Senator Fatman, in fact, at the last hearing of this committee, related that 5 of the 170 soldiers under his brother's command had committed suicide upon their return. And this past year has been the highest operations deployment tempo of the Guard since 2010. Our Guardsmen and women are needed for disaster relief, emergency response, and local security, whether it's battling floods along our coast, responding to nor'easters, or even mitigating a school bus driver shortage during COVID. Deploying them to overseas conflicts just depletes state resources and weakens domestic preparedness. As our nation's first, it's fitting we return our Guard to its original purpose and purview. Its fighters' first loyalty lay with their local communities and where their lives are not wasted on fighting the undeclared forever wars of D.C. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yes, Representative Durbin.
Yes, Jason, how you doing? Thank you very much. So I've heard a lot, and I think I'm getting to what the senator's getting to. Being in the reserves, I had a lot of Guard counterparts, and when you talk to them after a while, you understand that they take on a lot of missions from the federal government because they get funding from that. And I'm also curious, we hear a lot about the disaster relief, nor'easters, bus drivers, all that other stuff, but we have a Guard base that has F-35s. I don't think F-35s are going to be doing anything to help in Massachusetts when we have those type of emergencies. Those have a specific cost. Those have a specific use case. So my concern is if we sit here as Massachusetts and we were to do this, then you have these F-35s out there that can't be deployed unless there's an act of war, and we can't really use the services, then the federal government isn't going to give the money towards them to support that operation. Then what's the need for that base?
I would only say that I can supply a testimony from Maryland where there's a well-documented and cited, with full of citations, that talks about the myth of federal defunding. The gentleman who spoke virtually did focus on that as a imminent threat. I just don't believe it. That's been thrown around in a lot of states where adjutant generals have shown up and claimed that funding defunding would occur. To answer your question, this has been introduced in more than 30 states. It's passed the Idaho Senate, the New Hampshire House, Virginia, one of their chambers, and Arizona. It hasn't gone to a governor's desk yet, but it's growing momentum, and it has broad-based community grassroots support from Guardsmen. I think future testimony or other testimony virtually we're going to hear from Major General, who was a commander at Fort Devens for 35 years. So I think he can speak to that more in depth as well.
So if I can just go, just a little bit longer, is how does an F-35 help with what we're trying to say that the Guard should do? Because I'm sitting here and an F-35 basically has a war capability type of mission. It's not here for domestic, maybe domestic defense, but not to help like if there's a hurricane or something like that. So I understand that that base nurses, security forces, those people can go out and do it, but the main purpose.
Yeah, I don't know if it could be
So that's my
given to
issue.
another state. I don't have an answer for what happens when a F-35 sits there, and that is a, I look at the suicides, I look at the fact that we're violating the Constitution. Those are my crux issues on this.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
Yes, Representative.
Just my question, if you happen to know the National Guard's mission, like every branch has a mission, right? Protect by land, air, sea. I don't know off the top of my head, but the National Guard's mission, is it to protect the state?
It has a dual mission, which I believe Senator Vellis would confirm. It is a dual federal-state mission.
Thank you.
This doesn't put a stop to them deploying. It only asks that the title, that it goes through Congress and the legislative branch. That's all. And if it does, then they can be deployed.
Thank you.
So what do we, and again, I appreciate everyone coming here today offering testimony on this. And one of the challenges that I have is that we have a duly enacted federal law, essentially Title 10, that provides a framework from when a president can federalize the National Guard, right? Duly signed by the President of the United States. National Guard can be federalized, nationalized, however we want to say it. And I know you were here, sir, and you just referenced it before. You know, you've got these kind of this Article 1, Article 2. And what I'm really stuck on with this is, you know, the constitutional question. You just raised the Constitution. What I'm stuck on is how a governor of a state, when you have a president, whatever that process is, invoking Title 10, whether it be the F-15s and soon to be F-35s in my district at Barnes or elsewhere, right, to go overseas to participate in some type of a conflict. What legal authority does Massachusetts have to say no? That's what I'm stuck on. And again, we thank you very much for answering the question. No states have done it thus far. To your point, different states are contemplating it. But I would be really curious about our ability when a federal statute is invoked, specifically Title 10, to in essence say no.
The Supremacy Clause.
See, I
That
would.
supersedes legal statutes. The
So-
Constitution is supreme.
So what I would say in that regard is that the Supremacy Clause actually makes it harder, actually bolsters kind of what I'm getting at, is that you've got this duly enacted statute from the federal government competing with, if presumably this were to pass, a state statute. I would argue the Supremacy Clause kind of bolsters the questions that I'm raising, right? You've got potentially a direct conflict between a president saying, hey, Massachusetts, I want you to go to fill in the blanks. The governor of the Commonwealth, based on this law, if it were to go forward, saying, in essence, no. And I just have real questions about the legal permissibility of that.
I'd like to see it go forward and to the point where these questions do get brought up and to let the lawyers, debate these issues, because there's two versions to be debated or two arguments to be made on the Supremacy Clause from where I'm sitting and the one you mentioned. So I'd like to see it get to that point. That's the proper place where this should be debated, and I think it should also go to the general court, and it should be heard by the entire body.
One thing I wholeheartedly agree with what you have said is that, to me, it is absolutely insanity the way that the federal Congress, and I'm going to use your word because I think it's the right word, has abdicated their authority in this space. As was correctly pointed out, there hasn't been a declaration of World War II. There's this other legal framework that we haven't gotten into, the War Powers Act, that we could talk about. But it's just, there are some very legitimate legal, national security, and constitutional questions that I think we need to contemplate as a committee on this bill. But I really thank you for and I don't know if there's any other questions. Please.
Yes.
Actually, the senator just brought up something that I was going to ask about is, would this bill recognize the Congress giving authorizing the president to use military force and to deploy national.
Yes, it's for declaration or the,
Without declaring war.
Yes.
Just like we did in Afghanistan.
yes, as long as it's for one of the three authorized purposes of the militia,
So how
or
would it
or
change?
declaration
So
of
how would
war.
it change what's happening right now? Because right now.
Because it doesn't go through Congress, you know?
Congress has given the authority to the president to use military force in times of emergency and for missions that it feels is necessary.
This puts a stop to it at the state level, and the governor can just say no, because it hasn't been officially declared per the legislation. It's, the legislation does not mention the
what you're saying,
AUMF.
when you're talking about the supremacy clause, you're talking about how the Massachusetts Constitution is supreme to the federal Constitution?
No, I'm talking about the United States Constitution is the law of the land, and
The
that
federal-
takes,
But the Congress, using the powers of the Constitution, grants the president the authority to use National Guard troops. You're now saying that no, because our Constitution says.
no, I was saying
no,
that it does authorize, sorry, yeah, the legislation states that the Congress and the federal, at the federal level, they do have the authorization to use the National Guard, but only with a declaration of war and for the three constitutionally authorized purposes.
Again, if they're using their constitutional powers, how would this not put Massachusetts in some type of jeopardy?
Well, because we do have the 10th Amendment, you know, and that is any rights not granted to the federal level are retained by the states and the people. So,
But Congress has the ability to wage war, wage combat.
of course,
Again, and if we say no.
but there are constraints, yes, there are constraints,
but
as
if-
delineated in the
if we s-
Constitution and
If we
Article,
say no,
yes?
then how are we not putting ourselves in jeopardy?
I don't understand the question of what jeopardy would come of it. We have rights. We have rights as the state. As state, we have states' rights. The governor has power. There's a bill currently.
Wouldn't that essentially amount to an insurrection?
No. I think that's overstating it. No, of
Are you
course
sure?
not. I'm absolutely.
Because it seems like you're the Congress, the commander-in-chief is
They do not-
Hold on.
Okay.
The commander-in-chief is ordering his troops, because he's the commander-in-chief.
Mhm.
He has the authority to order his troops. He's ordering his troops, and our troops are saying, no, we're not going.
The governor is saying that.
But it's not her, at that point, it's not her choice. Or his choice, whoever happens to be there. Congress has said, yours are now ours.
This is
And
a
if
question
the
that.
government,
yeah.
and if our government is standing in the way and preventing that, how is that not an insurrection?
I just don't think it's an insurrection. I don't think it qualifies the definition of insurrection.
Well, maybe
It's
not-
last
maybe not-
legislation
maybe
that
it
would
doesn't
pass-
qualify as definition of insurrection. but
doesn't.
How does it not qualify as insubordination? As
Okay.
violation of any type of military law, for which the National Guard, I believe, is held to UCMJ.
Yeah, I would just defer to the senator who sponsored it, Senator Jelen. But I don't think the case, it doesn't hold water that it would be insubordination, and certainly not an insurrection.
Okay.
Senator?
I'm
Here.
good, thank you.
Sir, you reference, I just pulled it up just because the 10th Amendment, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited to it by the states are reserved to the states respectively or the people. I guess the challenge with that is that the Congress has spoken in this regard with Title 10. So it's not, this isn't an issue that the Congress is silent on. They have spoken. So I guess, and I don't want to run the risk of being redundant. My concern here is that the bill, and I see my friend who's going to testify here shortly on this in a second. The concern is that the bill seeks to impose upon Massachusetts a legal framework that we just don't have. And again, I'm going to put out, but Lord knows I am wrong frequently. I've been wrong multiple times today already. But if you can provide us as a committee with any legal authority why something like this wouldn't be given the judicial equivalent of, quite frankly, laughter. And I'm not saying that in any way, because I get what this is getting at, but I really think that I really question the legal authority for something like this to happen. And I'll be very candid with you, because of the previous conversation where we had with some of those unique capabilities that both the Reserve and the Guard, in this instance the Guard, possess. I mean, there are units out there in the Guard nationally that possess capabilities that the active component doesn't have. And I'm imagining a scenario where if Title X were utilized and they call Massachusetts or another state that enacted this, where they're asked to go, and it's, no, sorry, we can't. We've passed this law that says we can. Well, then we're talking about a real national security issue if they're being called up to do something because they possess a capability that the active component doesn't have. So I think there's legal issues, national security issues, but I can't stress this enough to anybody who comes forth on this bill today. I want to know more. I want to learn more. I want someone to submit something that shows me that I certainly, not the committee, because I'm speaking a lot here myself, that I'm looking at this through the wrong lens, or that I'm wrong on this. Because I think it's a fascinating, yeah, please.
So Title 10, Section 12301 demands that Congress declare war before going to war. And there's also a Perpich versus Department of Defense, now called Department of War, 1990. The Supreme Court ruled that Congress has the authority to order National Guard members to active federal duty for training outside the United States without a governor's consent or a national emergency, but it didn't take into account actual active duty combat, which is what the proposed legislation focuses on.
But there's been subsequent, like the AUMF authorization for the use of military force. I mean, there's been several subsequent statutes directly on point with this. So, sir, here's what I would just say. I think it makes all the sense in the world. I think this is a fascinating conversation. Love to continue it, but I think certainly from my standpoint, there's serious concerns about the again, I'm being redundant, the legality, the constitutionality, and really the national security implications, but really looking forward to continuing the dialogue. Please submit anything that you do have. And I know we're going to hear from others on this too. So I really appreciate you coming forward today. I think it says a lot about our Commonwealth that people are diving into these issues, and I really appreciate you doing that today. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Senator Jalen, please.
I want to say that I filed this bill from hearing from folks who have served and folks who are concerned about it. And I did not know how often the Guard has been deployed abroad in foreign conflicts and have been killed in foreign conflicts that they did not expect to serve in. I do have a lot of concerns about the constitutionality of what our president likes to do at the moment, but I filed this bill earlier before I knew that we would have a president like this. I did not know that I did know that we hadn't issued declarations of war since World War II, but I did not know in how many conflicts our National Guard has been called up to serve in at least 4 continents. So I think this conversation is worthy of continuing, not just about the National Guard here, but about the constitutionality of our president's behavior, potential president's use of our forces, including the National Guard. I remember really clearly during the beginning of the COVID epidemic when I asked strongly for the governor to activate the National Guard to go into nursing homes and protect people who were dying because there was a lack of staff and a lack of trained people. We need the National Guard, and we need it here, and we need it for purposes that, in my view, it was intended for. So I hope we will have this conversation, and I appreciate very much the knowledge that you all bring, and I hope we can be constructive and moving forward in some way. Thank you very much for your attention. And are there more people on this bill? Because I would like to learn more, both from their
Yes, there are.
comments and from your questions.
There are some. There's other testimony on it.
Thank you.
Any questions for the senator?
Just a statement, Senator Jalen, just on all issues. It's a honor and privilege to work with you. You lead on so many important issues, and I'm just grateful that you are a member of the Senate, and also just recognize Senator Collins, who just walked in. Thank you, Senator Jalen.
Revert to the list that we have here. We've got Major General Dennis Leach virtually. Major General.
Sir, you may be on mute.
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm Major General Dennis Leach. I served 35 years and 1 month in the Army Reserve, and I served as my last assignment was as the commander of all of the Army Reserve in the 6 New England states, and my headquarters was from 2002 to 2006 at Fort Devens, Massachusetts. I'm currently the executive director of the Eisenhower Media Network, and I applaud your committee for taking on this issue. It's a complex issue, one I'd like to elevate just a little bit, because I look at this more broadly and say that I look at it as a practitioner. I led the Army Reserve in the 6 New England states from 2002 to 2006 when we were deploying, and we were starting the deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, and it's a real eye-opener. Since have written a book entitled Skin in the Game, Poor Kids and Patriots, in which I took the issue, the all-volunteer force, and the concept behind it. Right now we have a situation where we have a mercenary army in some cases. We have a situation where young people are incented to join from the 3rd and 4th socioeconomic quintiles of our country, and the 1st and 2nd are exempt. I think this is bad for the country, and needs to be addressed, and I think that you're touching on these issues, and I applaud you for doing so. I'm concerned at this point that we have a misappropriation or misuse of the Army Reserve and the National Guard in particular. We see the National Guard in Washington, D.C., for instance, and what they're doing there now is gardening and landscaping and picking up garbage. This isn't good for readiness or lethality. It doesn't do anything to make our military more effective. We have a military budget that's out of hand, and we have a situation where it's too easy to go to war and stay at war today. There's no skin in the game. I often ask audiences in the United States when I speak, if we had a war surtax or a draft, how long would we have stayed in Afghanistan? We've stayed in Afghanistan for 20 years. 20 years of repeated cycles of hope and wishing and dying. It's wrong, and it needs to be addressed, and I think that the the issues that you're bringing up here are critical to this, and I applaud you. I've been working on this since 2013, and I applaud your issues here, and it's not an easy thing to come up with. It's not an easy thing to address, but it's one that as a nation we need to. I'll conclude my remarks with that.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee?
Sir, sir, you've probably heard, I don't know well, first and foremost, sir, thank you for your service. Obviously, you've had a lot of important service and a lot of different assignments, et cetera. I guess my question would be, and I don't know what time you signed on, but some of the back and forth that we're having about the legality of this, the constitutionality of it, the national security implications. I mean, granted, there's a lot of stuff going on right now stateside that, I think raises different types of issues, posse comitatus, things of that nature. But I think it's important to keep the focus on what this bill in particular kind of gets at, which is some type of invocation of Title X by the Commander-in-Chief, and essentially asking us to kind of project some type of legal authority or legislative authority to say, no, we're not going to go. And I just have real questions about, A, is that constitutionally permissible? If it is, please point to what supports that, and the implications that this has kind of for the bigger picture. Granted, everything you just said, right? There's any number of things going on that we could spend an inordinate amount of time talking about, but just kind of getting to the specifics of this bill and what it would require. How is this even something that's possible or legal?
I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a legislator. I'm not a judge, but I recognize the complexity of the issue. I think that the debate is healthy. I think it's one that we need to have as a nation, and I applaud your committee and state of Massachusetts for leading the debate in this. I don't have a ready answer, but as I say, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a legislator. I'm not a judge, but I do know that what I say is critical, and it's critical for the nation, and it's healthy that we have these debates. We don't have them today because no one has skin in the game. There's no penalty for losing a war. Paul Yingling wrote a paper a couple of years ago that said that a private pays a bigger penalty for losing a rifle than a general does for losing a war. I think that the War Powers Act is being abused, and we need to have some starch in the debate. I think that the state of Massachusetts can lead the way in forcing the Senate and House Armed Services Committee in Washington, D.C. to have those debates.
Senator Collins.
Thank you. Thank you, General, for your testimony. In my experience in the legislature and as a citizen of the Commonwealth, the Massachusetts National Guard has been exceptional in civilian and security roles, testing and nursing support during the pandemic, stepping in during the bus drivers' strike, natural disaster relief, and other important issues around the disaster relief in Massachusetts, security for the Boston Marathon, and other major events, and at times response to unrest. Do you feel that that's something that we can and should continue? And I know that the role that the Guard has outside of Massachusetts when called upon is something that is being discussed. But how do you feel about the civilian role?
I think the states have a right to employ their National Guard as they see fit within their boundaries. And every state will have a different view of that, but I think that within their boundaries, the states have an obligation to their citizens and the National Guard leadership to employ the Guard as they see fit.
Thank you.
No further questions. Thank you, Jenny, for your service and for your comments today. Next, we have Mary Rochford. Is Mary here? Virtual Mary? Samantha Shea. Virtual. Good afternoon, Samantha.
Good afternoon. Honorable state representatives and state senators and all of those present, my name is Samantha Shea, formerly Captain Shea. I'm speaking in opposition to the language as written in H 3829. As a veteran and former active duty commissioned United States Space Operations Officer, having served honorably on active duty for 7+ years, starting in 2013, and was honorably discharged in 2020, I speak from experience when I cite my criticisms of the proposed bill as written. The intent of H 3829, as I understand it, is to reassert the authority of the governor of our Commonwealth and how the Massachusetts Army National Guard and Air National Guards can be used in, quote, active duty combat. But herein lies a problem. For those who may not be aware, all Massachusetts Army National Guard and Massachusetts Air National Guard members are dual-hatted as both State Guard members under Title 32, as well as reservists under Title 10 of the United States Code. As such, Title 10 regulates how, when, where, and why, and in what capacity reservists, of which all Mass Guard members are, can be called into active federal service under the Commander-in-Chief, the President. Some subsections of 12-301 do require the consent of the governor to call into federal service members of our units of their respective state, Army National Guard, and Air National Guard, but others do not. As such, H 3829 would be moot. But as a former paralegal, I remember to not dispense legal advice. Under United States Code Title 10, Section 301, as an example, in time of war or national emergency declared by Congress, or when otherwise authorized by law, may order, to active duty for the duration of war or emergency and for 6 months thereafter. Meaning that the president can call to active duty if so authorized by law. It's like can call reservists, which our Guard members are, into active service. So saying that they need the governor's consent for that section, that's, the law already supersedes that. Now I have suggestions to amend the language of this bill, but that would align with all federal statutes as written and the U.S. Constitution, and would not degrade our unit's readiness and capabilities, and would meet what I assume to be the intent of H 3829. Thank you.
Thank you, Smith. Are there any questions?
Yes.
Senator Collins?
Thanks for your testimony. Could you clarify again what conflicts with this at the federal level? You had suggested there was a conflict in federal law with this proposal?
Yes. So Title 10, Section 12301. I dropped the link to the chat for those of you. It's a very short section of Title 10. It's like about a page. It outlines A through H of all the ways in which a reservist can be called to active federal service and what is required to do so. Some of it requires, if we're talking about Guard members, governor's consent. Some just requires members' consent. Some does not require either's consent and can be called to active service. Section A basically says, like, if Congress passed a law like the authorization to use military force, theoretically, like Trinidad or Aragua was a designated foreign terrorist organization. So under the 2001 AUMF, the president could call the 104th Fighter Squadron in Massachusetts to deploy the Caribbean and kill suspected drug runners. Under that section, it would be legal, and the governor, even if this bill were passed, the governor couldn't stop that from happening. It would be a contradiction to the law under Title 10 as written. One little caveat, but it wouldn't require the governor's consent specifically, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Use the customary thanks. Thank you for your testimonies today. Moving along. Brian Garvey. Brian Garvey here virtually.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Brian.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to testify before you here today. Thank you to the chairs and all the members of the committee. I would like to agree with what Chair Valise said earlier. I think it says a lot about our Commonwealth, and it makes me proud to be a son of the Commonwealth, that we can have these important debates about constitutionality, about where power resides, about where we use our military. It's been said during this hearing, it's been asked, have other states come forward and enacted this measure? And while certain chambers, I think most recently one chamber of the Virginia state legislature authorized a law like S2471, Massachusetts leads, so it actually does not surprise me. That's not a bug here. I think it could be a feature, in fact. I would like to quote something from the chat. Brian Z put in a clarification from Title 10 that may answer some of the questions. It says here that while the Secretary of War can bring to active status a reserve component for 15 days a year, units and members of the Army National Guard of the United States or Air National Guard of the United States may not be ordered to active duty without the consent of the governor of the state in question. And I think this is what gets to the point. It's not a question of whether the president is the commander-in-chief. That's clear from the Constitution. The question is, what authority does the commander-in-chief have, and under what circumstances? I believe it was Chair Valise who said earlier, Article 1 makes it clear that it's Congress that declares war. Article 2 says the president is the commander-in-chief. But being the commander-in-chief does not make one a king or a queen with unlimited power. That was the intent of the founders. They could only call up troops into service when given the authority of law. General Stewart said earlier that the national security situation has changed since the Constitution. I think that is certainly true. That our laws need to change to reflect that. And if they don't, we need to follow the law as it's written. As John Adams said, we are a society of laws, not of men. And I think we need to live that, and I think we need to uphold that in the spirit of our founders.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Choose customary thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pat Ford. Good afternoon, sir.
Oh, good afternoon. And before I start my remarks, I'd like to point out, well, I guess the time is running. I've testified in a lot of locations. The interactive nature, the congeniality, the conversation here is outstanding. My name is Pat Ford. I will argue, first of all, editorially, that the real national security threat lies not in our ability to deliver taxpayer-subsidized specialized services to foreign nations, but our ability to deliver those services to American cities and towns. I will also argue that a lot of the precepts underlying the conversation around federal power is built on a house of sand that started with the Nixon administration. My name is Pat Ford, and I am testifying today in my capacity as a member of the Libertarian National Committee, the Board of Directors of the Libertarian National Party. The Libertarian Party is America's fastest growing political party. A significant portion of the party's growth is directly tied to the presence of Gulf War era veterans who have coalesced nationally around Defend the Guard. As libertarians, we believe that the manner in which we should accord our troops respect should not just be a reflection of thank you for their service, but to rise in protest against engagement in economically driven foreign misadventures, police actions, and proxy wars, which serve to place the brave men and women who serve our nation in mortal danger. This legislation is straightforward. To forbid the federal government from conscription of National Guard troops absent a formal declaration of war. The current approach to overseas military deployment is the enactment of an authorization for use of military force, AUMF, a political dodge that defers ultimate decision-making to the executive branch. By abdicating their responsibility, Congress is refusing to exercise its duty under the U.S. Constitution. It is my belief that this legislation will effectively force the federal government to revert to the constitutionally mandated congressional declaration of war. Additionally, history is replete with examples of National Guard troops serving overseas during times of great tragedy here at home in the United States. Let's talk about Katrina. I would commend to your attention the recently released Netflix Katrina documentary. I would also point out that most recently, with the case of Hurricane Helene, Tennessee followed through on a planned deployment immediately after Hurricane Helene with over 700 troops, all of which I think could be argued that anyone watching the news would understand that needed to be in Tennessee. I'll read from a Defense Department testimony. It has been reported that National Guard units responding to Katrina did not have adequate numbers of tactical radios or high mobility multi-purpose wheeled vehicles adapted for high water operations because of their deployment in Iraq. Another example noted is that the 101st Air Assault Division, based in nearby Fort Campbell, Kentucky. This division, which has the largest number of transport helicopters of any Army unit, was not deployed to Katrina operations because it is in the process of deploying to Iraq. Opposition to this legislation often focused on the federal funding mechanisms that serve to subsidize state National Guards. I'll quote Arizona Congressman Gosar, and he spoke to this issue directly. Some opponents contend that passage of this bill would potentially threaten the Arizona National Guard's federal funding. This is incorrect. There is nothing in federal law that would eliminate federal funding if Arizona passes the Defend the Guard Act. Nor would Congress pass such legislation. The federal government needs a well-prepared Guard. I pledge that under no circumstance will I allow the existing administration to fund our state's National Guard. Defend the National Guard is an active consideration in excess of 26 states. We urge the passage of this legislation here in Massachusetts, where I live in Rhode Island, because we are, both of us, the birthplace of the American Revolution. I would also respond to the General's concern about the 10th Amendment group. The 10th Amendment group is simply pointing out the constitutional obstacles to this omnipresent executive branch. We see that formally happening today. That power needs to be wheeled back. Does that represent a direct challenge between state authority and federal authority? Yes, it is, but it's based on a constitutional mandate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions?
How do we get around the national security? So, pushing aside the very large debate we've had thus far about the legality of this, I realize we could debate that ad nauseum. The national security implications. Let's say that, by all accounts, I'm now going to paint a hypothetical. There is a war that the vast majority of people consider to be a just war, whatever that means, you know. So not a foreign policy, I don't know if it was you or a previous witness, misadventure, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
No declaration of war. National Guard unit somewhere possesses a capability that is needed overseas. So happens that governor of that state, for whatever reason, doesn't see the wisdom of the war, says, no, my folks aren't going. How do we get around the national security implications of that?
Well, first of all, I think this forces a dramatic rethinking of our National Guard policy. You know, one can argue about global warming, but one can't argue about the impacts of weather and the dramatic weather changes we've faced cyclically here in the United States in the last 2 years. The point is, shouldn't we be adequately funding, and as we are, most would argue, our national military? You know, the presence of jets, you know, as someone who lost friends on 9/11, the presence of jets here in the Commonwealth was a critically important response. But isn't that part of what the federal government should be directly funding? We've got this muddling of missions here. I quoted two very recent examples, the most, of course, importantly, being Katrina. The national security issue should be focused on the United States of America and its communities. That's the role of the National Guard. We have a well-developed military all over the world that should be focused on these quote-unquote national security solutions. Again, many of these National Guard units are focused, if you will, in terms of their skill sets on issues that affect their state. Tennessee, 700, anyone see the devastation in Tennessee recently? 700 Guards members left. Why are they being sent over? And some could argue, too, that the National Guard can be, frankly, a cheaper alternative. Staff the military adequately, have them respond federally to military situations, have the National Guard be prepared for issues here in the Commonwealth, where I live in the state of Rhode Island, or places like Tennessee, or some of the weather-impaired areas in this country. That's their job, not to be over there fighting proxy wars.
Well, I mean, I could spend a lot of time responding to that.
Mm-hmm, of course.
But what I would just keep it at this, is that good, bad, or indifferent, there is a current, as it relates to troop readiness, we'll call it.
Mm-hmm.
There are unquestionably Guard units in America that fulfill a role, and maybe this is because of the blurring of the active component, the reserve, and the Guard post 9/11. Some would say before that. But again, I go back to, there is a need. Governor says no. It is a need that, for whatever reason, the active component cannot, or active or reserve component cannot fill. How do we get around that?
It's political. We have to be brave, because it's political expediency that's dictating that. It has nothing to do with the ability of the United States of America to garner the necessary resources to fund an adequate defense, and they already are. It's a question of what is politically expedient for an executive branch that has way too many powers. This whole notion that we could be fighting multiple wars, as we are in this world right now, and call them an exercise, that's fraud. And people are dying because of fraud. Taxpayer money is needlessly be wasting because of fraud, and people are dying in the United States because, I mean, look at the forest fires. How is it possible that we have natural disasters almost becoming a weekly news event, and we don't have adequate resources to react to them? Staff up the Guard for what they're intended, which is, and I'm not a fan of this word as a libertarian, but the defense of the homeland. And the defense of the homeland can incorporate so many things, weather-related. We've got a National Guard that's being deployed. And by the way, I congratulate your references to the Posse Comitatus Act, because so many Americans don't even know what the Posse Comitatus law is in this country. We're facing that as the next level of expansion. The executive branch needs to be drawn back. The federal government needs to stick to the 10th Amendment of our federal Constitution, and states need to adequately fund and have the resources necessary to, quite frankly, save lives and do the amazing work they did, from everything from COVID to any one of the natural disasters that have happened in this country.
Questions? Anyone else? Sir, appreciate your advocacy on this. Thank you very much for testifying today.
Thank you for your hospitality. Again, it's outstanding.
Thank you very much. General Driscoll. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Vilas, Chairman McGonigal, esteemed members of the Joint Committee on Veterans Affairs. I am retired Brigadier General John Driscoll, a former aide to the Civilian Aide to the Secretary of the Army, and also a former Land Component Commander of the Massachusetts National Guard. I just want to echo my comments of my former colleague there, Tom Sellers, and his support for Senate Bill 2501 and also the House Bill 3873, and also echo my former colleagues Nikki Ivers and Tom Stewart about my opposition to House Bill 3824 and Senate 2471, Defend the Guard. But I sit here today to talk in support of two pieces of legislation, the HB 3876 and SB 2762, an act relative to the headstones for the long-serving or perished members of the Massachusetts National Guard, and HB 3860 and Senate Bill 2458, an act to establish the Guard Enlistment Enhancement Program.